Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Welcome to Front and Center, where we focus on developments in the Philippines, legislation that provides policies and directions that strives to promote a better economy for the country, issues that concern the welfare and well-being of every Filipino. All of these and more will be Front and Center. You can watch this program on our Facebook page, that's Radyo Pilipinas World Service. And this program, Front and Center, can also be heard on the following shortwave frequencies. That's 9.475 megahertz, 15.640 megahertz, and 17.820 megahertz. So join us for another edition of Front and Center with your host, Jerome Toledo. On Wednesday, February 5, the House of Representatives has signed a petition to file impeachment against Vice President Sara Duterte. The congressman has mustered 215 signatures Wednesday afternoon, making the Vice President Sara Duterte the first second-ranking official in the executive branch to be impeached by Congress. And that complaint has been transmitted into Senate, and now the ball is in the Senate to handle those impeachment complaints. So how is this turn of events may shake up the Philippine government? Joining me now is the constitutional and law expert and former national president of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines, Attorney Egon Cayosa. Attorney, thank you for joining us in the program.
Good morning, Jerome. Good morning to your listeners.
Okay, so let me begin with this one. After the impeachment complaint has been filed in the Senate, after more than 200 congressmen signed the petition to impeach the vice president. So President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. In his press briefing on Thursday distanced himself from the ongoing impeachment proceedings against the vice president. So he emphasized on that briefing that the executive branch has no involvement in the matter. But as we know, Attorney Cayosa, his son, Representative Ferdinand Alexander Marcos, is in the Congress, and that Representative Marcos is part of the first family, and he is the first member of the Congress who signed the document to impeach the vice president. So what are your thoughts on this, Attorney Cayosa, regarding this development?
One, it is good for the country that the impeachment charges have been forwarded to the Senate, because this is a matter of accountability of public officials. It's not politics, but it is accountability, because there are allegations, and in the congressional hearings that investigated the allegations of corruption, bribery, and abuse of power, we saw for ourselves that, and there were admissions and affidavits and documents tending to show that the hundreds of millions of public funds were used improperly. And there were also public statements by the Vice President threatening the First Family and the Speaker of the House. There have been also researches made that the receipts signed by persons who were allegedly received confidential or intelligence funds do not exist. Those persons do not exist. So these are already badges of corruption. So we saw this. It is important. And the Vice President claimed that Congress could not be relied upon because they are biased. They were ganging up against her. So it is important, and it is helpful that the process unfolds and the case is brought to the Senate, because under our Constitution and the rule of law, it is the Senate that would determine whether or not the charges have basis, whether or not the Vice President is to be held accountable for these acts. So it is not good that it stays indefinitely with the lower house, because these are just charges and counter press releases, propaganda, counter propaganda. It is to the interest of the country that we follow through with a process that will determine whether or not those charges are true. It is also good for the vice president because it gives her a chance to answer the charges and to defend herself. Due process. Everyone will be given due process. And then it is also very important that another body, not the accusing Congress, but the Senate, will sit as the judges. And it's very important also that the rule of law is followed. And that's why, since the Constitution provides for the process of impeachment, and the Senate itself has its own rules for impeachment cases, it is good and important that we follow through with this until the Senate decides whether the Vice President is guilty of the charges or not, and whether or not he will be removed from office and disqualified from public office under our republic.
I see.
So it will give us political stability if due process is followed, the rule of law is followed, and justice is served.
Okay, but Attorney Cayosa, I would like to add a point here. Yeah, although the Congress has mustered more than 200 signatures from congressmen to impeach the vice president, but the timing of the filing of this of impeachment complaint against the vice president, they filed it a few months before the midterm election. So how do you respond to that?
Well, it doesn't matter because we could understand that before the congressman would file an impeachment charge, they had to study all the evidence and all the angles and all the witnesses, because it will be foolhardy for anyone to file a case and he will not be able to prove it. So we could understand, and it is good that the congressman took their time to check the documents, to check the records of government, to check the witnesses and their statements to complete the record. So we could understand that. Perhaps the timing is not ideal, but once they were convinced that there was enough proof that the vice president committed these acts that they charged her about, then it is their constitutional duty to vote on it and to transmit the impeachment complaint if they have enough votes to the Senate. But we still have time. There's still time before the election. And it is now in the court of the Senate. The ball is now in the court of the Senate. And we hope and we pray that the senators will do their duty.
Okay.
We are very sad to hear some of the senators, and many of them are lawyers, saying that they cannot handle the case anymore because they already recessed from their legislative session. That is wrong.
Yeah.
Because the Senate continues to exist even after they adjourn their legislative sessions to make laws. Because their function as judges in the impeachment court is a non-legislative function. It is not affected by an adjournment in their legislative function. And this has already been explained by the Supreme Court in a previous case. In 1995, Senator Pimentel brought a case before the Supreme Court asking the Supreme Court to stop the Board of Canvassers, the Joint Committee of Congress, from canvassing the presidential and vice presidential elections because Congress already adjourned sine die.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court took that opportunity to explain that it is the non-legislative functions continue. For example, their function as Board of Canvassers. In this more recent case, their function as judges of the impeachment court.
Okay.
So there is already guidance from the Supreme Court. So we're just wondering why they say they can't do that.
Okay. Actually, I would like to ask this question, Attorney Cayosa. In a press briefing recently, Senate President Cheese Escudero mentioned that they they can process the impeachment complaint filed by Congress due to lack of time, and at the same time the Senate has already adjourned. So how is this going to play out?
Well, as I said, there is nothing to prevent the Senate from reconvening and sitting as an impeachment court. That ruling in the Supreme Court in the Pimentel versus Joint Committees of Congress in 1995 is still valid law, still valid jurisprudence. So I hope the Senate President will look into that and reconsider. Perhaps what he means is they don't want to convene. That's different from we cannot, because legally they can. As a matter of fact, legally under the Constitution, that is their sworn duty. The senators cannot refuse to sit as judges. That's part of their job. It is part of their function as senators. We are paying their salaries. They get support from the people. They were elected for 6 years.
Yeah.
Their term of office does not stop when they go on recess.
But they're hesitant.
Or when they adjourn.
But they're hesitant to accept that.
By the Supreme Court.
They're hesitant to process the impeachment complaint. Not to mention that the election campaign is upcoming. The election or the campaign period for national positions will start, I think, this Sunday or next week.
Well, I think that's more accurate. They are hesitant or they don't like because they would rather be campaigning. But it is not correct for the Senate President, who's also a lawyer like me, to say they cannot legally convene. The truth is they can. As a matter of fact, they should, because if they look at the Constitution says once the Senate receives the impeachment charge from the House of Representatives, what is clear in the word of the Constitution is that and the Senate shall henceforth forthwith proceed with the trial. Forthwith means immediately, without delay. So we don't understand why they make the campaign period as a reason to delay. I don't believe that's enough.
They want to.
That's not a legal reason. Perhaps it's their own vested interest that keeps them from meeting as an impeachment court because they would rather campaign. But in the scheme of things, this is a very serious charge. It involves the Vice President. It involves hundreds of millions. It is about accountability of public officials. Is it not better? Is it not more fair that the Vice President, that the Senate proceeds with the process, which is they will inform the Vice President of the charge, and under the Constitution, the Vice President is given 10 days within which to answer the charge, and thereafter, under the own rules of the Senate is supposed to conduct hearings every day until they resolve and hear both sides. So all the rules, the Constitution says they should do their job, later, sooner, not later.
Okay.
There is nothing in the Constitution that says when it's campaign period, the senators can go on leave and they don't need to do their duty. Unfortunately, for those who are re-electionists, that's not the case. The law requires them to look at this impeachment case as soon as possible to be fair to everyone. Those who persecute, the accused, and the Filipino people. We deserve to know what is really happening and who should be held accountable for this if there indeed misuse of money or misuse of authority and power.
All right. Just a short question, Attorney Keo. So what is the jurisprudence again that you mentioned regarding this impeachment?
Pimentel versus Joint Committees of Congress. It's a case brought to the Supreme Court by Senator Coco Pimentel Jr. questioning the authority of Congress to canvass or to act as board of canvassers in the 1995 presidential election, because at that time when they were canvassing, both houses declared adjournment sine die, just like what they did. But the Supreme Court said no, you're wrong. We cannot stop the Board of Congresses because that's a non-legislative function of Congress, and Congress remains in operation even after they recess from their legislative duties.
I see, I see. Okay. Attorney Chaos, meanwhile, in relation to that, some progressive lawmakers are really pushing the impeachment despite the Congress or the Senate break to give way for election campaign. So yeah, how viable is this method, Attorney Chaosa?
Hello?
Yeah, how viable is this kind of method? Because some progressive lawmakers are pushing this impeachment despite
Well, it's
the
not
breaks.
only some progressive lawmakers. The whole country should pray for the senators and ask them to proceed with the trial. Because we want to know the truth. We want to be fair to everyone. We want to give the Vice President a chance to defend herself. We want to hold our public officials, including the high public officials, accountable for what they do with our money and what they do with their power and their office. So it's not only them. Many, and I hope you, as member of the media, should be one of these. We also understand, and we hope that the senators are talking to each other at this point. There is nothing to prevent a majority of the Senate from requesting for a special session. The Senate still exists. That's a fact. They have a fixed 6-year term. So even if they already adjourned, they can be called back anytime once they have enough votes. Or the other process is a majority of the senators will write to the president asking the president to request for a special session for a particular purpose, could be possibly this impeachment case, and the president will do that, and of course the Senate, the Congress will come back in session. So these are the possibilities. We hope that they don't have to go to that extent. Whether they can finish it within their term is immaterial. What is important is there should be no delay. They should sit at it, and if they can't finish it, then the next Senate will just take over and continue with the hearing, because this is all the evidence, all the testimonies will be on record. There will be no, it will not expire. The next Senate can continue sitting as the impeachment court. It is very important for us. I think it is more important now because there is a forthcoming election.
Yeah.
Is it not better for the country to know exactly what happened here, so that we will be guided when we start voting for our local and national leaders come May election? Is it not better for the congressman so that they'd be given a chance to prove their charges? Is it not better for the vice president so that she would be given a chance to defend herself? Is it not better for all of us to watch the impeachment proceedings? Because under the rules of the Senate, the impeachment proceedings will be public. So we will see. We will see how these senators comport themselves, how they behave. Is that not good campaign for them? For those senators who are competent and who know how to do their job, that will be free publicity for them.
Right.
But for those senators who might not know what to do, possibly they don't want the voters to see how they comport themselves in a hearing.
Okay.
So transparency here would be very helpful for our democracy, very helpful for all the parties concerned, and very helpful for accountability of public officials.
Okay. So going to my last question, Attorney Cayosa. So out of let's dig deeper to these impeachment complaints. I think 7 articles of impeachment has been filed by the Congress. So out of 7 impeachment articles presented by the Congress, one of the complaint is the suspected or alleged undeclared hidden wealth worth 2 billion pesos, which was allegedly unexplained in her statement of assets, liabilities, and net worth, or SALN, filed from year 2013 to 2016. And the complaint also stated how the growth in her net worth is allegedly disproportionate or unmatched to her salary as a public official. However, Attorney Gail said there was a ruling from the Supreme Court, which was echoed by the Sandigan Bayan, that says that a statement of that SALN in general should not be used as a weapon for political vendetta against civil servants. That's in relation to the 134 million civil forfeiture case against the late impeached Chief Justice Renato Corona. So, as a constitutional expert, how would this kind of accusation will play out in an impeachment court?
Well, that's the ruling of the Supreme Court. That's the opinion of the Ombudsman. But the Senate, an impeachment case is a class by itself.
Mm-hmm.
So the Supreme Court cannot dictate on the senators. The Ombudsman, his opinion may be considered, but he cannot dictate. As a matter of fact, I disagree with the Supreme Court and the Ombudsman because SALN is an instrument of accountability and transparency. And it is very sad that the Supreme Court or the Ombudsman or these institutions that are supposed to safeguard and ensure the wise use of money and to ensure that there is less corruption in our society speak that way. It is very sad. I disagree with that view because SALN, if you look at the SALN law in the Constitution, it's a required document for any public official. On the other side, on the practical side, this charge is one of the easiest charges to prove because you just get the SALN of the vice president and get the record of properties that might have been declared in his name. If there's a mismatch, then you have proven your case. Or if it is true that these properties are worth 2 billion pesos, they'll have to prove that. They'll have to show which are these properties. Why do they say it belongs to the vice president? It will be very difficult for the vice president to explain how she amassed 2 billion pesos. As a matter of fact, you mentioned about Chief Justice Corona, who was successfully impeached. He was removed from office by the Senate. That's the charge that nailed him down. There were some properties of his that the complainants were able to document that were not included in his SALN. And Senate, one of the grounds by which the Senate impeached him and removed him from office was that. So the same rule applies to anyone.
Okay.
A janitor or a vice president or president or chief justice, the same rule applies. So we welcome all of this opinion, all of these angles, but what is important is the process must unfold. We have too much delay in our justice system, in the traditional court system. That is why in the Constitution, for these high government officials, so that they will not be unduly impeded in doing their jobs because of charges like this, that's why the process is impeachment, because impeachment is designed to be much faster than the courts, because in the courts they don't conduct hearings every day, and they conduct hearings for many cases. In an impeachment charge, Senate is to hear it every day, and that's the only charge that they will consider. So it's designed to be much faster. Secondly, the decision of the Senate is final. You can't appeal anywhere else. And like the courts, you start it with the first level courts and you appeal to the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court. And unfortunately and sadly in our country, our justice system is very delayed. It's one of the issues. I hope the Senate will do their job much faster. We need that very badly in our country. Regardless of the result, guilty or not guilty is secondary. What is important is the process must unfold. Everyone must be given a day in court, and the Filipino people will be able to watch exactly what are the charges, what are the evidence, and what are the arguments. We need that. It is good for our country, and I hope the senators will reconsider and convene themselves into an impeachment court sooner rather than later.
I see. Okay. So, one more question before we end the discussion for today, Attorney Cayosa. So, do you see any, or how is this turn of event between the executive and the legislative may affect or create a shakeup or create any disruption in the Philippine government?
But it should not create any disruption because it's part of their duty. And the president is correct that this is a function of the legislative branch. The prosecutors are the congressmen. They are the ones who charge the vice president of an offense, impeachable offenses, and it's the Senate that will sit as judge. So the president, being a co-equal branch, he belongs to the executive branch. He should not meddle too much with the work of the legislative branch out of courtesy and respect for a co-equal branch. Neither should the Supreme Court interfere too much with this case unless there's grave abuse of discretion. But having said that, so it is proper for the president not to intervene too much. But having said that, for all intents and purposes, the president, even if he is in the executive branch, he's the political leader of the country. He has supporters in both Senate and the House that comprise the majority. So, of course, they will listen to him, look at his signals. But yet, for example, in this case, he said we should not waste our time in impeachment. But the congressmen were not convinced because they saw the evidence themselves. There were admissions, there were signed affidavits, there were documents, there were certifications from COA, from the Philippine Statistics Authority, and many others.
Right.
So
Okay.
the president cannot also prevent the congressman from pursuing if they feel that there's enough evidence and facts
Alright.
to charge the vice president.
I see. Okay, I'm afraid we don't have much time, but I would like to thank you, Attorney Egon Cayosa, for joining us in the program. So, in short, this proceedings is all about public accountability of a
Correct.
government official. Okay. And with that, thank you, Attorney Egon Cayosa, the constitutional and law expert and former national president of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines.
Good morning. Thank you to everyone.
And that concludes this edition of Front and Center here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Together with our production team, led by Erwin Peñano, Hiro Lucero, and Milo Junella. This is your host, Jerome Toledo, saying mabuhay and love the Philippines.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.